And hello everyone. Happy Friday, everyone. This is Coach Elex, and this is Get a Grip with Coach Elex. I'm your host. With me is the most incredible co-host,
Stephen. The medium is here. Did you almost forget who you were? You kind of paused before you said Coach Elix.
No, because I'm so excited about today's show and, excited to talk about pride but before we get into all of that conversation, how are you?
I'm very good. Thank you for asking.
Yes, and let's get some logistics out of the way. What are you up to this weekend?
Well, I am up to something very big and something very exciting. That Sunday at noon at the Sagamore Inn, I will be doing my first live event, reading event in over a year, post-COVID. Or pre-COVID by the last one that happened. So I'm so excited to get to see people in person and get to do readings and get to do my notes. So this is going to be very exciting. It's outside, there's a tent, and unlike, inland, it's not going to be 93 degrees. The forecasted temperature is like 79 here down the Cape. So this is where you need to be because it's going to be beautiful, and you can get tickets still. The remaining tickets at stephenthemedium.com/Sagamore.
And it's outside. I mean, it's a beautiful setting, and you get to see us and be with us. And it's been a long time since the last time we got to see, many of our followers and friends. So I am super excited about that.
Me too.
So now let's talk a little bit about a couple of things that very, very important that I want to get out of the way because it's sort of in my space. The first thing is I wanted to share with all of you that my sister, who has been battling breast cancer, she underwent surgery 2 weeks ago, double mastectomy with reconstruction. If you're a cancer survivor, especially breast cancer survivor, you know that is not a small surgery. It's a big deal. She's also been struggling with her chemo treatment. She's been hospitalized 3 times. She's in the hospital now, recovering from an infection in the site. And I need prayers from all of you. So the power of prayer can heal anything. And I am asking all of you to, in spirit, in our third eye, hold our hands together and create a circle around my sister so that she can overcome, this very hard disease. So that's something that I wanted to get out of the way because I didn't want to keep thinking about it. So. Okay, with that said, today we have an amazing show. We are going to talk about pride. And, Stephen, I will tell you, by the way, he may be listening. So, Mr. Bill Whalen, who's a dear friend of mine, if you're listening, this is kudos for listening, shout out. But Bill says to me, sort of a serious way, why do we get a month when everyone else gets a day? I said, do I even need to answer that? We deserve more than a month. A month is not enough to celebrate pride, to celebrate love. Because loving is human, and this is about celebrating our authentic selves. What would you say to Mr. Whalen about that, Stephen?
Well, I love Bill, and but I think whether it's him or anybody else, it's sad that an intelligent person would actually ask that question. It's very, very sad to me, and just sort of would probably take me a second or two to respond, just trying to process, am I in an alternate universe that someone would actually ask me that question? Why do we need a month? It's just I'm not really sure. It would take me a little bit, but and Bill's if he asked that question, he's not alone. It's
and that's the point. He's not alone. He doesn't mean it in a bad way at all.
Of course not.
But this is an opportunity for all of us to use that moment as a way of letting people know why that matters. Why is it that it's important to us? And also, I wanna say, you guys have heard this name many times before, but Lindsay Darling, she manages my brand, she manages Steven's brand, but I tell you guys, she really is everything that you see here, everything that everything that I do, she's the engine behind this beautiful frame. She really is. And she's gorgeous herself. But I'm telling you, Lindsay, if you're listening, thank you for everything you do. I get my outlines for my show, and she does a lot of work to make sure that we offer you guys an amazing show. So, and I know she does a lot of work for you. Yes, correct. So let's talk a little bit about Pride. And, we can't talk about Pride without first talking about Stonewall and the Stonewall uprising, the history behind what that meant for anyone who's gay and lesbian. It's been actually 52 years since the uprising of the Stonewall in New York City, New York City's Greenwich Village. And that's an event that is widely considered to be the catalyst for our community, the LGBTQ community, and a catalyst for the LGBTQ civil rights movement. So we can't talk about Pride without talking about what Stonewall is. And so if you're listening, if you're an ally, if you are somebody who is, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transsexual, queer, you know about Stonewall likely. I hope you do. If you're a young person, you should learn about Stonewall, because all the liberties that we have today come as the result of many, many, many sacrifices, many people who put their lives, for us to have the benefits and the liberties that we have today as gay, lesbian, bisexual, and queer people. So Stonewall, just to give you guys, those of you listening who may not be aware of what Stonewall is, and for people who are not gay and lesbian, this is something that may not be, of awareness to you. Stonewall was a filthy dive bar, and regulars knew to order bottles and cans because the glassware was rarely cleaned. This is one of those, know some facts about Stonewall. It had, a lot going for it. First of all, the city's Human Rights Commission had ruled 3 years earlier, this is in New York City, that bars could no longer refuse to serve gay people. And it was one of the very few places that let everyone in the door, whether you were transgender people, gay, lesbian, whether you were an effeminate gay man, a person of color, it didn't matter. They were, the one bar that would let everyone in. And, Mark would appreciate this, this fact about Stonewall. It had a great jukebox. And black drag queens often control the jukebox, and they would vogue in front of it. And music was everything. It really mattered, at the Stonewall. And, because they allowed anyone to come in, people could dance, people could be themselves, same-sex couples could dance together and not feel judged or not feel persecuted by anyone else. In fact, there's somebody, a young person, 17-year-old at the time, that is a Stonewall survivor, if you will. He said, "I felt like a human being for the first time in my life." You know, that's the first time I ever saw same-sex dancing. So imagine somebody in 1969, 17 years old, experiencing that for the first time. What do you think, Stephen?
Well, I think it's amazing. I did go out for a second, second week in a row that I went to look at the time and shut my laptop and got disconnected. So, but I got right back on, and I think it's pretty amazing. It's amazing that I'm not sure, Elix, if you had mentioned that these, including Stonewall, was owned by the mafia.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, there's plenty of other things I'm going to talk about,
Yeah,
including that, and that's why they say the people who experienced Stonewall, they were allowed to do what they did because mafia, they were able to pay cops and pay the authorities to keep operating.
but the problem with that was the like Stonewall and many other places like this also though didn't have running water. They didn't have a lot of the necessary things that bars and restaurants have because they just weren't being regulated because of that fact. So it was. I mean, I think that was the least amount of gay and lesbian worries when they were coming there because they were like flocking there because of all the discrimination and that you just couldn't be out. You just there were underground little parties and whatnot to be able to express yourself. But just imagine as a straight person that you think of your wife and you or your girlfriend and you couldn't walk down the street holding hands or you could be thrown in jail.
Absolutely, and I had said that you must have dropped off
I did. I'm
when I
sorry.
said that one of those known facts about Stonewall is that it was known as a filthy bar.
Yeah.
And regulars had to order bottles and cans because the glassware was rarely clean
Yes.
for the reasons that you talked about. So we're about to take a break. If you are an ally, if you are gay, lesbian, bisexual, queer, transsexual, you please feel free to call in. Please feel free to share your experience, whether positive, negative. If you are somebody who experienced Stonewall, we'd love to hear from you. But when we come back, I want to talk about what was it like being gay in 1969 and why, like you said, Stephen, why this filthy dive bar meant so much for the gay, lesbian, and queer community. So we're going to take a break and we'll be right back. And again, 508-222-1320 if you want to join us. And hello and welcome back to Get a Grip with Coach Elex. I am your coach. I'm your host. Oh my goodness, Coach Elex. I am your coach.
Yeah,
I am your coach. And with me is my wonderful co-host,
Stephen the Medium.
Stephen the Medium. And we are delighted to be having this conversation with you today. Today we are celebrating Pride Month. So the focus of our show is about love, because loving is human. And we started our first segment was about where does pride start, where did it start? And it all started with the events at the Stonewall in New York City in 1969. And and that's what created that catalyst for that civil rights movement for gay, lesbian, transsexual, queer people. So here's, when I think of 1969, for those of you who may have experienced that, for those of you who may be young, here's a reminder of what it was like to be gay in 1969. There was no rainbow flag. There were no pride parades. Gay men and lesbians could be fired from their jobs at any time. They could also have their apartments, their children taken away from them. That also means that if your partner was sick at the hospital, you didn't have the right, and often they were refused to see their loved ones at the hospital. In the eyes of the world, they were perverts. Gay people, gay lesbians were referred as perverts, and often pedophiles and mentally ill people. That doesn't make you irate, then I don't know what does, because even as I'm reading this, it wasn't exactly illegal to be gay, but it was close to being illegal. Homosexual acts remain illegal in every state except Illinois today. Police raids on gay bars were very common. Bars where gay people experienced their second-class citizenship most overtly. So, that was an ongoing event at the time. This was not just a one-of-a-kind raid in New York City. This was something that kept happening time and time again. In New York City, masquerading as a member of the opposite sex was a crime. So that in and of itself gives you a little taste of what our lives and the life of those who lived through the time was like back in 1969. And that brings me, Stephen, to the subject of when, first of all, I get very upset when I see younger gay people take the liberties that we have today for granted. Because, for me personally, it's almost as if you're disrespecting all the people before us, all the people that die so that we could have these rights today, all the people that fought, all the people that lost everything so that we could have the life that we have today. You and I have been together for 28 years, married now, and we finally can say we have equal rights to those, of our heterosexual friends. What do you think, Steven?
Well, I think even though maybe legally on the books we are, but that doesn't stop society from not treating us, our community the same way. And, it really, when you were talking about what it's like to be gay in 1969, never mind when these places were raided, people were beat. Some people died. Mm-hmm. And if you think about the June 20th, 1969, when the riots actually started, when it started, I think it was 6 days of protest.
Yeah.
Listen, you've got to be in a place of just I've had it. And that's what, thank God for our brothers and sisters who did that for us, in the courage that it took. And I think there was a story I read a while back that on that night, it was early in the morning, when Stonewall was raided, but I think it was a lesbian was being thrown into a truck, and she was arguing, and so they just hit her in the head with like a rock or a bottle or something, and she just yelled out and said, this could happen to anybody or so, and that's when people in the neighborhood just started throwing rocks and anything they could at the police because of the way they were treating this select community. And I mean, and I don't know if you mentioned this too, Elix, that Judy Garland had died 6 days prior, and Judy Garland, as us in the community know, and I'm sure others out of the community know, that she was an icon for the gay community, and there was a lot of people mourning her that she died, and I think in a very weird, positive way, that sort of also fired up people. They've had it, just because of mourning Judy and just how they had been treated. So it's I just think that for someone to get to the place of doing 6 days of riots, and then at that point the police they were completely caught off guard, that even neighbors in the community that wasn't gay were helping, because they saw what was going on and they knew it wasn't right. So, but as you mentioned, Elix, thank God for those brave brothers and sisters in 1969.
Yeah, and as you said, it was a hassle to own a gay bar back then. So it makes perfect sense that Stonewall's owners were in the mafia, because that assured that they were paying off cops to leave them alone, or at least give them a warning of a raid. But that alone, as clearly as the event of Stonewall happened, it was not foolproof. And then, as you said, on June 1969, the police rolled up unexpectedly. It was about early 1 a.m. approximately Saturday morning. And they strike early on a weeknight before the patrons. Usually they were known to strike early on a weeknight before patrons had an opportunity to drink too much. But that night that didn't happen. They flip on the lights and they start checking IDs. And in 1969, again, one of these very interesting facts is that when the bars were raided, you needed to have at least 3 articles of clothing that pertain to your birth sex. I mean, how freaking crazy is that? Otherwise, they would take you in. Now, that wasn't the law, but the police at the time enforced it as the law. And by very number of accounts, the police were doing sex checks on the transgender women and arresting anyone who didn't pass or didn't have any ID or those 3 articles of clothing. But as you said, Stephen, something happened, and it could have been a combination of all of those things. The death of Judy Garland 6 days before. It could have been that people were just fed up, and so something happened, and that date, our community said, enough is enough. We are not going to take this anymore.
Well, something, Elix, that not to interrupt, but there was prior to Stonewall, there was the first gay rights organization that was created. It was in the 1920s. I don't remember what year it was, and I think it was by a German immigrant who created this organization for gay and lesbian, for the community. And I think that it was the following year that that they disbanded because of the cops got wind of it, but they did actually get a published newspaper that they were doing that got out before they were disbanded, which is really the first the first country's first gay, like I guess interest newsletter, which is really cool. So even back, imagine even in the 20s, 1920s, this was, like we were around and wanting to have equal rights, and so that was what 40 something years before Stonewall.
Yeah, yeah, and to me, that's when I envisioned that, and you and I have seen many documentaries about Stonewall, and it's actually really hard to sit through those documentaries, knowing that our brothers and sisters really suffer through that type of injustice. Um, and I envision them resisting together, shoulder to shoulder, and that how that was a turning point for, again, like I said before, for that being that catalyst for that gay and lesbian civil right movement. So I think we're gonna take a break, and when we come back, I want to talk about why we remember Stonewall, because for many of our straight allies, they think of Pride as parades, as people, being, like over the top. What do people call us? Like over the top,
Flamboyant.
flamboyant. But that's not what pride is about. That we, of course, we are flamboyant. But it comes from a very significant and important place
Well, not
for all
everybody
of
is
us.
flamboyant either.
Not everyone is flamboyant.
Clearly, there's no stereotypes, and I hate when people, comment
But put us
on that.
in certain boxes.
Well, yeah, like yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Like
yeah.
the guys have to be feminine, and the lesbians have to be able to build a house.
But again, that's part of, Stephen, that's part of our opportunity to educate people, because that's what happens. Straight allies, and we're talking allies. We're not talking people who are not necessarily, our allies. Straight allies often have many misconceptions about what being gay means, and we all have that opportunity. We all have, the opportunity to make sure that we educate all of them as it relates to, who we are. So when we come back, we're going to talk about why it is that we remember Stonewall, and why it is that it's important that we remember Stonewall and we keep celebrating Pride. So if you want to call 508-222-1320, and we'll be right back. And hello and welcome back to Get a Grip with Coach Elex. I am your host, Coach Elex, and with me, the one and only Mr.
Stephen the Medium.
And today we come together to celebrate with you Pride Month. And as we've been talking about, you can celebrate Pride Month. You can't not talk about Pride Month without talking about Stonewall, which is what the beginning, what created the opening, the catalyst for Pride activism in the United States and beyond. So in the weeks following Stonewall, activists in New York City organized the Gay and Lesbian Front. At the time, they called it the GLF. And the purpose of that was to bring gays and lesbians into an organized activism. And a year after that, activists organized a march in Central Park to remember the uprising of Stonewall. And that is the inaugural Pride March, the first time thousands of people come together publicly to say, here we are in the daylight, and we're not ashamed to be gay. So, often many of you may have heard, when we chant, we're here, we're queer, we're proud. And that's the kind of pride, pun intended, that was available to all of us, or would not have been available to all of us if not for the Stonewall movement. And with Stonewall, the spirit of the 60s rebellion spread to the LGBT people in New York and beyond. And that inspired by that New York City and the events in New York City, there were activists in cities all across the country, including Boston. And that's when organized gay pride celebrations began from that year. And that's what we have here today.
The Pride Parades.
That's right. Mm-hmm. Pride celebrations.
Yes. Yeah.
So when we began, what began that night, that's what I meant to say, has not ended there. And when I think of, the Stonewall movement, most of us think of it as a coming out party for our community. And Stonewall is a sacred space. Pride parades, by the way, there's sacred space for the LGBTQ community. And, and the next time you happen to be, find yourself in the middle of a parade, that's how meaningful it is to all of us. And Stonewall, we could say, it can be argued that Stonewall changed the lives of many people then, many people today, and I would argue that it will continue to change the lives throughout the years to come. But it takes people like you, people like me, like Stephen, like Mark, to speak out, to educate, and to make sure that we call people out when they speak about our community in ways that it's simply misinformed or just simply ignorant. One thing, I had read this recently, I wanted to take some time to talk about, my experience, reflection, and personal experience as well as Stephen's, because we both have very different experiences coming, growing up gay and coming out. But there's something I read recently that it just gave me so much pause as I was reading it, and I'm gonna read it to you guys. It's and when, again, if you're straight and you don't understand somebody what being gay means, or if you're somebody that says it's a lifestyle, let me just tell you, you're wrong. So let me share this with you. Queer people don't grow up as ourselves. We grow up as playing a version of ourselves that sacrifices authenticity to minimize humiliation and prejudice. The massive task of our adult lives is to unpick which parts of ourselves are truly us and which parts of ourselves we've created to protect us. And that gave me so much pause because it almost like when I read that for the first time, like my whole life, the movie of my whole life played in front of me. And it reminded me of so many times, for me personally, I learned very early on to just honor who I was, just to be myself. But that put me in a place where I was bullied. I was hurt. I have this one experience that I don't know, for some reason just came to mind as I was reading that quote. I remember being in high school, and of course, gay guys, we love being around, girls. And I went out with these girlfriends and to a party, and on the way back, we needed a ride home. So one of the girls got one of their boyfriends to give us a ride, and it was a pickup truck. And the only space for me was in the back of the pickup truck. And that was, I was like, fine, no problem. I don't care, right? And I remember when they got to my house, they stopped. And as soon as I was about to get out, they drove again, which allowed me I couldn't get out. And then they would stop, and then they would drive again. And if ultimately they dropped me off about a mile away from my house. And I'll never forget that experience, because that's what bullying is all about. And ironically, by the way, one of those guys in that pickup truck very recently found me on Facebook and sent me a Facebook, friend request. And I thought to myself, what? Like, I have no interest in being a friend of yours. And not that I'm holding resentment, because I'm not holding resentment, because there's a difference between holding resentment and cutting the cord of people who don't provide value for you and your life. What do you say about that, Stephen?
Well, after 28 years, I never heard that story. That's a very sad story, and I'm glad you just handled it the way you felt like you should handle it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, no. I was going to say, I also experienced bullying growing up, also, and but then when I understood, like who I was and accepting myself, which was certainly a process, it's really and sometimes as difficult as it really is the only way to get to a place of being like completely happy with yourself, is just to be your authentic self. But with society and over the years, obviously it gets, slowly gets better and better. And not to downplay the rest of the world, it's not like the States. It can just be horrendous for our community also. But it's the only way you can, you can, as my MO and my grandfather used to say, you teach people how to treat you. So it's something that, I think even in the States, it's not 100%, clearly not at all, as you can see what's going on in this world. But I'll tell you, with that bullying story, I'll tell you a very quick story that Elix, you probably remember, when I was in juvenile court down in Wareham, and I remember we're waiting for the judge to come out. And sometimes I'll be the first to say that my mouth goes before my brain catches up. Sometimes. And I was sitting in the courtroom, and there was just the attorneys, because we were waiting for the judge. We were going to do a first call, and I remember this guy, straight guy, was talking about how him and his wife were going, I think it was to South Beach, down to Florida, and in front of his friends and attorneys and said some comment like he's looking to go to see the freak show of the guys holding each other's hands, and he's like that at a minimum always gives me a good laugh. And I remember saying, well, you know what, I'm sure based on behalf of my community, when they see you with just a bathing suit, they laugh a lot also, because he was fat. It just came out. The attorneys that were next to me started laughing. He never talked to me again, nor did I care. And then the judge came out. But, of course I could have handled that much better than I did. But it was, when you're that sensitive and have been bullied so much of your life, and sometimes it just comes out. And in that particular case, it did. And you know what? I don't regret that. I don't regret that at all. And put this dope in his place. So.
And that's where the balance, that's the Stephen and Elix balance, because, to be honest with you, there's many things I have learned from you about taking a stand for myself, and not allowing people to cross that boundary, which oftentimes, even to this day, sometimes, somebody may say something that, doesn't land as okay, but I will say nothing because I don't want to cause a commotion. You, on the other hand, you don't care whether you cause a commotion or not. You just say whatever you say, and honestly, I totally, appreciate that, respect and appreciate that, and I love you for who you are and what you bring to our relationship. We're going to take another break. When we come back, we're just going to wrap up the conversation. I definitely, there's something about this conversation that I do want to go back to, when people, often straight people, refer to gay people as a lifestyle. And I want to talk about that, because that is the one thing that sends me over the edge. So if you want to join the conversation, 508-222-1320. We'll be right back. And hello, and welcome back to Get a Grip with Coach Elex. I am your host, Coach Elex, and with me is the one and only
Stephen, the medium.
And we are talking about Pride Week and talking about how Pride Week came to be, the event of Stonewall in 1969. And this has been an awesome conversation. But one of the things that I wanted to bring back is when somebody talks about being gay as a lifestyle and how wrong you are. So if that's you, I'm telling you right now, you're wrong. A few years ago, I had a colleague, incredibly smart, educated man, who said to me something like, tell me about your lifestyle. And I was like, what would you like to know? But do you want to know if I cook, if I golf? And he's like, no, what about being gay? And I didn't, first of all, it took me off guard because I'm like, you gotta be kidding me, right? I expect that kind of comment from somebody who is ignorant. He wasn't. But I stopped him. I dead in the tracks. Listen, being gay is not a lifestyle. A lifestyle is golfing, wanting to cook, wanting to travel. Those are lifestyles. Being gay is you're born gay. And if you still question that, ask yourself, well, do you choose to be straight? Is that something that you actively choose? Because if the answer is yes, then we may have a different conversation. We may have to have a different conversation, but more likely than not, the answer is absolutely not. That's not something that you choose. That's something that you're born with. And so we wouldn't be choosing. This is not a choosing to be treated as a second-class citizen. It's not a smart choice for any of us. So this is not something that we choose. This is something that we are. And if you want to, gain the respect of anyone in your life who's gay, first and foremost, understand that being gay is not a lifestyle. Anything else you want to add, Stephen?
No, I think you summed that up nicely.
Yeah. So Stephen, as we reflect on Stonewall, on Pride, what would you say are your takeaways from this conversation today?
Well, I certainly hope that anybody who's listening and then even listens to the recording has maybe a different perspective than they may have had, or maybe gaining some knowledge that they didn't have, and maybe just to feel it's really as a medium, as we're talking about this, I can feel the energy of 1969 and what happened, and of course the ones that were part of that are no longer here, that have crossed over, so which is really, really cool. But that's certainly my hope, because there's a lot. I'm sure there's people that are listening that never even heard of Stonewall and didn't even know what Stonewall was. Yeah. And so just that alone, I think, is such a great reason. And I'm so glad that you did the show just based on Pride.
Absolutely. And if you never heard of Stonewall, that's your assignment. You got to look it up. You got to learn. If you have people in your life who are gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, that will create that opening for you to better understand a little bit of their lives, what it is that they're going through, and stop being so judgmental. There's we struggle with our authentic selves to begin with. So when we find so much judgment from others, it makes it really, really hard, especially for young people. By the way, look at the statistics. A lot of young people who struggle with their sexuality, they end up killing themselves. That's not the way it should be. We should be loving. We should be accepting people. If you have somebody in your life that you suspect is gay or lesbian or bisexual, transgender, create an opening, welcome them with an open heart, Allow them, create a space so that they can come to you and talk to you about who they are. Because that's all they just want to be. People want to be loved. People don't want to be treated as second class anything. They don't want to be treated as people who don't belong. And unfortunately, we've experienced, some of us, most of us have experienced that. One of the things, again, Stephen, I learned from you and I appreciate so much is just really owning who you are, taking a stand for who you are. And sometimes you're going to have people who are going to walk away, and that's okay. Sometimes those people who walk away will come back. What were you going to say?
I was going to say that in those particular situations, it's necessary, I think, for growth. It's necessary for staying positive that if you do lose someone, it's just the way it's supposed to, it's supposed to happen, But one of the things I was just thinking when you talked about, just especially the younger generation, and you probably will understand this too, Felix, as someone who's dealt with, being gay and being bullied. But the time frame that I went through that was that if, say, I had an issue with school or at school, then when I left there, say Friday to come home, and I had my neighborhood friends and kids that were, that were my good friends, you leave and you at least have Friday night, Saturday, Sunday of just being in this good environment. Now, I can't even imagine what it's like with technology, because growing up, there were no cell phones, and there was the technology wasn't there. Now, you can't get away from it because everybody has cell phones and, social media and every part of technology. So if you have an issue at school, it follows you at home, and you obviously you can't go on social media, but there's no barrier, there's no force field any longer, because back when I was growing up, you left, you got home, and you've got this big shield around you with your friends, and throughout the whole weekend, you can't see anything that's like derogatory or negative because social media wasn't there. Now it's a different world, and such a more difficult world, especially for this community, or for anybody being bullied, mind you.
For anyone being bullied.
Yeah.
It also breaks my heart when I, and again, as an executive coach, somebody who works with people of all kinds, it breaks my heart when I hear a story of somebody who's being held back because they're afraid to be their authentic self. It's heartbreaking, and you cannot live the life that you want until and unless you embrace your authentic self. And yes, that means, I'm not saying that life is going to be hunky-dory. No, it will be hard. Sometimes it is. But as I've said, I tell people there's consequences to everything that we do. There's good, there's bad, there's neutral. Every decision we make or don't make have a consequence. And, if you're being held hostage by your own conversation of, oh my God, I can never come out because, my parents, because my job, because you will be allowing fear to run your life, and a fear-based conversation will lead you to fear-based results, and it's a winnable game, period. Non-winnable game. So if you walk away from anything today, is if you're struggling with honoring and being your authentic self, step into that. And if you know somebody who is, open your arms, open your heart, and help them through this process, because they want nothing but to be loved by you. So that brings us to nearly the end of our show. And Stephen, this was a wonderful conversation, conversation that you and I have very often. But tell people again what you're up to Sunday.
Well, I am up to a grand event on Sunday, and seeing this is now getting to post COVID. You can come, and the song "If You Could See Me Now," you're gonna be able to see me Sunday in person, live. And you're going to get to see Elix with me. So I'm really excited. It's at the Sagamore Inn. So go get tickets before it's too late. But I am going to be doing readings. I am going to be handing out notes that are actually written by me, but and transcribed by me, but actually the source of what's in the notes are from your loved ones in spirit. And the cool thing, the wild thing is that when I start doing that, which will be tomorrow, preparing these notes for Sunday, your loved ones will step forward and they know who's going to be at that event clearly, because I'm not going to have notes that don't apply to anybody. So it's really wild that your loved ones in spirit know you're going to be there. You've got a ticket. You're going to be part of the event, and they're going to give me information to write down a note for you guys. So just go to stephenthemedium.com/Sagamore to get tickets, and you can find me anywhere and everywhere under Stephen the Medium.
Awesome. So stop thinking about it, get in action, get it done.
Yes.
Buy your ticket now. And before we go, kudos to the town of Attleboro, because I understand the mayor is going to be raising the rainbow flag tomorrow, I think it is. So kudos to that town for supporting our community. And with that said, if you can find me at Coach Elix on Instagram, Facebook. My website is at coachelix.com, and or you can always listen to my podcast, the #1 radio show turned podcast on Audible, Spotify, and Apple. And so I think that's it for today. Thank you everyone for listening. Have a wonderful, wonderful weekend and a very proud month. Bye everyone.
Bye.